Welcome to my brand new YouTube channel. Well, I say brand new, it's kind of been sitting here for like 2 or 3 years and I just haven't been using it. Don't tell anybody. So today I'm going to be talking about the things that have really held me back when I've been learning and studying. I've always studied very hard. Well, always. Since I started studying, I've studied very hard. I take my learning very seriously. I never feel like I fully arrived. I always try and keep pushing. It's taken me about 3 to 4 years to get from being like a kind of hobbyist. I would cry if I heard myself saying this back then, but newbie. I was convinced I was great. I wish I had like half the self-confidence I had then. Now that would be amazing. So yeah, I've been a professional for the last couple of years and studying for a couple of years longer than that, but I always make sure that studying is part of my heavy rotation. But recently I've been learning there are a lot of things that are holding me back. I used to get kind of grumpy, I'm not gonna lie. I would put my whole self into studying, trying so hard to get better, and honestly just be really frustrated that I couldn't see more tangible improvement. Other people told me they could see it. I couldn't. I wanted to be further ahead of where I was. I felt like I was putting in the time and it was so frustrating that I could be putting in the hours and not seeing any growth. I was studying. I was doing everything I knew how to, but I was missing out on some really important things. And that is the focus of this video. Ooh, I've just noticed there's like some serious dramatic side light happening right here. It's actually kind of like blowing me out. It's just emphasizing the lack of sun I've been getting lately. Anyways, so what do? When we're putting in the hours, we're working our asses off and we still aren't seeing the improvement we want to see. Well, it might be worth looking at the kind of studying you're doing. So let me walk you through the kind of stuff I used to do. I create reference images for a living. So I am super pro reference. I love reference images. I could sit here and tell you all day about why you need to be using reference. Maybe I should make a video on that too. Every time I'm doing studies, I work from reference. I don't make things up. I play it by the book. And then there was just always this feeling that I was being held back. I absolutely feared that anyone might see my process because it was an absolute mess. It was a lot of guessing. And I felt like, like a fake. I would look at my friends who were able to just make stuff up from imagination, or they could sit there with their sketchbook and just draw beautiful things, and I would just weep inside. I'm like, I would just die if anyone saw my sketchbook. It's trash. And I couldn't understand, and I really struggled with it. I have this really negative association of working from imagination. In my head, that's where bad work comes from, because we're not using reference, we're not trusting reality, we're not informing our work, we're not being smart. I was wrong, okay? I'll admit, I was wrong. There is everything wrong with only doing imaginative, just as there is everything wrong with only doing reference pieces. And that's the trap I fell in. I was so focused on being aware of how working from imagination could hold me back that I didn't stop to think the ways it could help me. All of this is to say that the key when we're studying is to find balance. So I learned fairly early on in my journey that there are kind of 3 main modes of study that we can break it down into. You can do studies from reference. That includes working from photos, working from life. We're basically trying to replicate what we're seeing. It's kind of that copying mode of study. For 2, we have imaginative, like I just said. So that is the act of creating art, doing studies without using any reference at all. So we're purely working and flexing our imaginative skills. That means no reference, that means they're looking up how other people did it. It's just like purely what's going on up in here. Number 3 is master studies. So master studies are where you replicate somebody who's done it better before. So generally speaking, old masters, which is where it gets its name from. It's when you take work from someone you admire and you try to kind of replicate it and dissect it and figure out what was going on in their head when they did it, why they made the decisions they made. The hope there is that we can kind of absorb, osmose all the good stuff that was going on in their head. It's like quantum leaping ahead and just absorbing all the smarts of all the people who came before us. Like, we don't learn to play the piano by writing our own songs to begin with, right? We learn by playing songs that have already been written. So it's kind of like that. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can take a look at work that already exists and pick it apart for all the amazing things that people have already figured out. Like, we could just spend the next 40 years trying to replicate the same discoveries people have already made. So why do that? We could instead be learning those things as quickly as we can, and then using the time we've got left to become like original masters. And then, you know, the cycle completes itself. So obviously there's a big difference between these and stealing or tracing or like excessively copying. We're not passing this work off as our own. It is purely a learning resource. So if you haven't done this before and you're like, ooh, this is really interesting, I will ask you to exercise caution. Just be respectful. Don't go tracing over people's stuff. Don't go like sharing your direct studies of other people's work and claiming it as your own. Always make sure to be tagging people if you're doing anything like that. Preferably ask for permission first. So yeah, just be smart and be nice. Now, what I found when I was doing my studies was that my time was pretty evenly split between reference studies and master studies. Maybe a little bit more on reference than master, but I would bounce back and forth between the two. So I would do some master studies and try to learn what they were doing. And then I would go and do my own reference studies and apply what I just learned from my master studies. Combining those two was a really good way of just like making the most of my resources. But, and it's a big but, I completely neglected to do anything else. I didn't think I needed to. I thought it was fine. I thought I was doing everything I needed to do. And I was improving, so it didn't seem to bother me too much. I spent about 3 years only working that way. Oh my gosh, I could probably count the number of hours I spent doing imaginative stuff in the last 4 years on the fingers of one hand. Like, honestly, I just didn't touch it. I didn't see the point. It was difficult. Everything I did looked awful. I didn't use imaginative work in my final pieces. I was just, was working from reference. That's what we do. So I didn't touch it. And guess what? I really struggled because of it. I found more and more that when I was reaching out to my peers and asking for help, people were kind of seeing the cracks in my facade, and my friends would be like, yeah, like, this is really nice. Do you sketch much? And I'm like, no. And you can't make me. Seriously, I hate sketching so much, but I'm getting better. And it really took my friends sitting down with me and pointing out that there were a lot of skills I was neglecting there. That working from imagination doesn't have to be like always making it up and never using reference in your final pieces. It's purely a part of the puzzle that I was neglecting, like an unturned leaf, essentially. Now, I was really stroppy to hear this. This is not what I wanted to hear. When I asked for advice, I was really hoping that they'd say something like, your work is perfect, nothing needs to change. It's not your fault, it's just the algorithm. You're already doing exactly the right thing, you just need to put 2 more weeks worth of working and it's just gonna figure itself out. So yeah, you can kind of imagine my reaction when the universal advice that was given to me was to practice a thing that I was the worst at and hated more than anything else. But I did it. And I'm really pleased I did it. It was a hairy couple of weeks, honestly. I tore out the first sketchbook page I did. Never a good look. I cried more times than I can count. I actually made myself a habit tracker of sorts. It was a sheet of paper with checkboxes on it, and it was called Drawings That Pissed Me Off. I got to aggressively tick off a box every time. It was great. I went kicking and screaming through this early phase where all of the work that I was doing before, it was just like I couldn't access those skills without my reference. My imaginative work was just terrible. I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't even want to let my husband see it. I was just like, I was so ashamed. And there is so much to unpack there, that this stuff that was supposed to be studies, supposed to be for me, supposed to be for learning, was causing me so much upset. I was so focused on the end result of having pretty pictures I could post on social media that I was making myself actively miserable. That's not what we're doing here. We're learning, we're studying, we're growing, we're taking this time to make ourselves better, to like invest in ourselves. And instead I'm just mentally beating myself up. It took a real mindset shift to face that thing that I really felt bad at, that I didn't enjoy doing, to kind of be humble, let go of my ego and say, yeah, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm gonna learn. Can you guess what happened next? It only took about 3 weeks before I started making work that really impressed me. I was suddenly not afraid to pick up my sketchbook. I found myself on vacation spending hours a day with my iPad just trying things out. I am not a fast worker, my images are tightly rendered, but here I was on vacation sitting around with my iPad just drawing poses from imagination, just seeing what I could do, making some honest to God disgusting drawings, like they're frightful, but I was learning. And the fun thing is they got less frightful every time I did them. Now, my theory is that there's a kind of growth curve going on. When we start something, we have this like rocket up in the beginning and everything looks great and we just like gain skills like there's no tomorrow. But the better we get, the more this kind of tapers off. And this is when we start to find the plateau, kind of diminishing returns. And the thing is, my referenced work was getting pretty good. I could kind of really well replicate a photo. There's a couple of photorealistic paintings I did that I'm really proud of. And then I just found myself feeling like, what's the point? If all I can do is copy a photo, like what value am I adding as an artist? And that's a horrible thing to be grappling with. It felt like crap. But then by trying this whole other avenue that I was frightened to touch, I managed to access the beginning of that growth curve again. So I went from these diminishing returns where I was just like, what can I do next? To finding this whole uncovered, untouched, undiscovered pasture of information that I'd been neglecting. It was only a couple of months ago that I had these conversations with my friends where they pointed out that I really need to be working on my sketching and my imaginative work. And already I have just leapt ahead so far. And it's so much fun. I really want you guys to be able to experience this feeling. If you're anything like me and you feel like you're just stuck and you aren't progressing, I'd encourage you to take a look at what your routine is like, what kind of things you tend to do and what kind of things you tend to neglect. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? What activities do you do all the time and what activities are you just not doing? We have to learn to keep our egos in check. It's really hard, okay? So our egos are important, they protect us, and art is so personal. We're creating really personal things and it's really hard to let go of that personal attachment, right? This is kind of, we're bearing our souls every time we paint something. And it's really hard to sit back and go, yeah, it doesn't look that good. Or yeah, I really need to improve here. But what happens when we're able to separate ourselves and our identity from that of our work is just healthy, happy, wonderful. Now you might be like me and you might be neglecting imaginative work, or you might sit somewhere else on the spectrum. You might absolutely love imaginative work, but you just really struggle when you work from photos or anything like that. You love photo work and you love imaginative work, but you never stop to wonder how other people have done these things and see if there's any tricks you can steal from other people. Within these 3 study modes, there are endless opportunities to improve, and we should be cycling them. We shouldn't be neglecting any of them. No matter what the work we're doing, there is value in each and every one of them. And when we find ourselves just kind of tunneling in on one or maybe 2, we're really just slowing down. It's like just having one that's dragging behind, and that's really hard. It's much easier to improve by tending that thing than trying to get so good at the other things that the other thing doesn't matter, right? So overcoming that feeling, like it's all right for me to sit here and say, you just need to do the thing you hate doing. I know firsthand how horrible that is. It just felt awful. And I did pick up a couple of tricks that might be able to help you. The first thing that helped me overcome that horrible feeling and like access that really fast growth was shifting into a studying mindset. We tend to live in this production mindset where we are so fixated on the outcome of things and how good they're going to look. And study mindset's playful. It's without ego. It is curious and it's humble and it's fun. I was approaching studies as something I could show off later. It's kind of one of the traps of being a social media artist, is that everything is potential content, right? So even when I'm studying, I'm just sitting there thinking, how can I make this look good for social media? How can I conceal my flaws so people on social media won't see it? That's not good studying. That's not a study mindset. That's still a production mindset. Shifting into a study mindset where failing is fun and it's part of the process, and understanding that each cruddy drawing that we do is going to take us one step further along the path. That was a huge shift for me. The sheet of like drawings that pissed me off was a huge part of that for me. It took the idea of failing, which was something I couldn't stand, And it made it fun. It meant that every time I did an awful drawing, instead of just, crying or shut myself in my room and screaming into my pillow, I would grab this sheet of paper and laugh as I aggressively attacked it. And that's the kind of thing we need in a study mindset. We don't want to be so fixated on being the best and letting our egos fight for attention. If you imagine a scenario where there are two students, one has to be the best at everything. They don't like participating unless they know they're going to be any good at it. They get grumpy when their classmates do something better than them. Or there's the student that's not afraid to ask questions. They always show up and they always give it their best shot, even when they know they're terrible at it. They will be in the group cheering along other people and just generally making people feel better about the fact that they're all in it together and they're all learning and they're no threat to anybody. Of those two students, who do you think is more fun to be around? I was the first student. Everyone hated me. My point is, we all know the kind of people that we like to be around, right? We know the kind of people that we'd like to learn and study with. Try to make sure you're being that person for yourself. Try to turn up with curiosity and tenderness and a willingness to be wrong. Whatever way you can make studying fun and less all or nothing, less pressure, you should be doing that, because it is so hard to learn while we're putting that much pressure on ourselves and expecting perfection every single time. That's not a study mindset, that's a production mindset. Now, the other thing that really helped me was trying to make it easier for myself. This was something that my mentor said to me. He watched as I was floundering around with all these difficult exercises of things I'd never done and was kind of having a little bit of sulk that I wasn't better at them. And he was like, why don't you just take it one step at a time? You don't need to be running before you can walk. And I was like, I was taking something I've never done before and expecting myself to be really good at it immediately. His suggestion was, why don't you go halfway there first? So instead of trying to draw characters from imagination, so pose, costume, perspective, all from imagination, which no wonder I was struggling. He said, why don't you try taking a reference photo and drawing it from a different angle? Still imaginative, but you just have a little bit of information to work with. Or you could try taking an existing character design and draw it in a different pose or something like that. You could try doing something like a draw this in your style. D-T-I-Y-S. D-T-I-Y-S. Yes, D-T-I-Y-S. That's really hard to say. Oh my gosh. Draw this in your style. It's where an artist will design their own character, post it on social media, tag it with draw this in your style, and other artists will draw this in their style. It's pretty self-explanatory. But I've seen this going on for a year, I guess. I don't know. I don't remember the first time I saw it, and I've just ignored it every single time because I'm like, I'm a serious artist. I've got better things to do than participate in social media memes. I can be very self-important. So I just never gave this a go. Everyone was having so much fun with it and it didn't register. But when my mentor told me about how I could be doing imaginative stuff and taking the load off by trying halfway, I was like, oh, wait, there's a thing. There's this whole thing that people are doing. And so lately I have been binging Draw This in Your Style challenges. And it's been a great way for me to flex those muscles without straining them. It basically means that I am working from my imagination. I am using all those things that I'm trying to figure out, but I'm not doing it completely on my own. I have some guidance. I have some rough reference to work from. There is no risk of me copying it because A, it's not a photograph, and B, if I just copy it, it's going to look exactly like the original, which is not the point of this. It's just literally draw this in your style, not draw this in my style. And I've had a lot of fun with it, and it builds community. Everyone gets excited when you're drawing each other's stuff. It's been so much fun, and I have grown more rapidly in the last few months than I have done maybe in the last couple of years combined. That is the effect of taking something fun, trying something new, and leaving your ego at the door. Now, just to make sure that this isn't too specific to me, you could apply this if you are the kind of person who hates working from reference. You could apply this there too. You can kind of reverse engineer that versus what I was saying. You could take a reference image of a pose you really like and draw your own clothing on it. Or you could take a reference picture that has an interesting pose, but then use the imaginative skills that you love in order to make that pose more interesting, or bring your own shape language into it. Basically what I'm getting at is, rather than running away terrified from the things that we struggle with, we should be finding ways of making them more approachable. I'm morally opposed to the whole starving artist myth. I do not agree that artists should be suffering in order to make their best work. I think it's just complete nonsense. It drives me mad. And so rather than running scared from the things that we struggle with, we should be finding ways of making them fun. And we should not be bludgeoning ourselves with things that we hate doing either. So any opportunity we can to make this fun, that's what we should be taking. By searching for our weaknesses instead of hiding from them, we're going to start learning so much faster. I'm still living this. I'm not some like person who's got this all figured out. This is still a struggle for me all the time. And these last few years, I've really struggled with this feeling that I was plateauing. And this stuff has really helped me. And quickly too. I was so angry like 2 months ago that this stuff wasn't coming naturally to me. I was convinced I was flawed, defective in some way. And I was annoyed that other people would just seem to get it more easily than me. And it's amazing the difference that just 2 months of trying and being open-minded and leaving the ego at the door, it's amazing the difference that can make. And I think that your work is just gonna fly if you can sit in that mindset, if you can be the interested, tender, compassionate, excited student who is purely there to learn and have fun and not to be producing, not to be better than everyone else. That is where your gold is gonna happen. All right, and I am going to leave before this sun just washes me away. Do you remember at the start of the video when I had like skin tones? I wish I was better at VFX so I could just turn myself into a light beam and peace out. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. I will see you all again soon. Ooh, does that mean I get to do the whole like YouTube thing now? Like, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks.